Hello everyone, I'm Darshana. So in this video, I thought of talking about another topic that's relevant to the COVID situation, particularly regarding the mass vaccination policy that has been undertaken by many states around the world. And I was actually inspired to talk about this particular topic um, after watching a video by in this. Actually, I first came across this particular individual, a scientist called Geert Vanden Bossche, his Twitter account, and someone had retweeted a tweet by him, and he's apparently someone who has been an insider in the vaccine manufacturing industry. So if you look at his CV, he's been a program manager for the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, that is Gavi Foundation, which is, I think, that was instrumental in coming up with the COVID vaccines as well. He was a program manager there for the Ebola vaccine program back in 2015, and he had worked as a senior program officer at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as well. So Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is actively promoting COVID vaccine. So he has worked as a R&D head at the GlaxoSmithKline and so on. So he's been pretty much an insider in the vaccine manufacturing industry, which is why I was interested in what he had to say. And and there were like couple of interesting interviews of him in social media. So this one is in particular I was fairly intrigued by what he had to say in this discernible channel. I'll share these interviews and his profile details in the description, so you can have a look. So basically what he says is he's raising a few points which are kind of which counters the current narrative, official narrative of around mass vaccination. The official narrative is that it is sort of to get back to normal. It's kind of essential to have mass vaccination, which is how we are going to achieve herd immunity, and then we can get back to normal. So which is why some countries are very aggressively pushing vaccines. In countries like Israel, they have very tight regulations, even limiting certain freedoms of the people who are refusing to get vaccinated for different reasons. Could be religious reasons, or could be because they think that the vaccines can cause harmful effects in the short term or in the long run. But states all around the world are like very aggressively pushing the vaccines, right? So um, so one of the things that he highlights is that that the vaccination campaigns, those he's basically using, as I understand, because I'm not an expert in this area, or I'm not from a biology or immunology related background, but as from a layman's point of view, from what I understood, what he says is that he's using couple of concepts in biology and in immunology. One is evolutionary pressure. The other one is immune escape or vaccine escape. So according to him, the when you subject a particular virus to immense evolutionary pressure, right? When you do mass vaccination, for example, in a very short period of time, when you try to vaccinate a large number of people, so then you subject that virus to a lot of pressure, evolutionary pressure, for it to mutate. And the idea of herd immunity, as he explains, it's not like the virus would spread in a homogeneous manner, and then you achieve herd immunity in a natural. If you didn't have any intervention, it will basically jump from one population to the other when each population will get naturally immune or get exposed and naturally immune to the virus, and eventually it will die down after 3 cycles. So that's the natural scenario. But when you what happens, for instance, when you vaccinate the elderly people or the adults, then the what he says is that the virus will select the variants which are more susceptible to infect the younger population, because then it is kind of pressure to do that, right? It is subject to a lot of evolutionary pressure to select mutations to infect the younger population, which may not have been that much affected by the kind of existing original strain, so to speak. So then you are kind of subjecting the younger population to an increased risk, right? Because they will be facing these variants that are mutated to infect them, to be more virulent among the younger population, for instance, right? So the other thing that he highlights is that the reason for one reason for this to happen is that these vaccines do not prevent infection. So now the manufacturers have claimed that they prevent infection. They rather say that they are more like, according to him, they are like prophylactic vaccines. That is, they prevent symptoms, right? So effectively, these people who get vaccinated, when they get infected with COVID later on, so they'll have a suboptimal immune response. That is, they will still shed viruses, and the viruses will most probably or could be variants, right? Variants that may have evolved to respond to this particular immune response. So actually he comes up with a very drastic suggestion that the people who receive the first dose, because by definition they anyway have a suboptimal immune response. So by definition, those who get receive this first dose, they should be quarantined. So it's kind of a very drastic suggestion that he proposes, because his argument is that these people are more likely to shed variants. So and the immune escape happens because of this suboptimal immune response. So a kind of analogy that he draws is from another area of infectious disease, that is with respect to bacteria. We know that when we take antibiotics, so if you stop the treatment halfway through, then you might get a flare, and that might create a variant that is more virulent and deadly, and you might get a flare, and you might get a drastic outcome because of that. That's why you usually have to continue the entire antibiotic course, otherwise it will escape the immunity, right? So it's something similar, although it's not the same thing, but he suggests is that is likely to happen when you have suboptimal immune responses that are imparted using mass vaccination across a huge portion of the population within a very short period of time, right? And so it's like, as I understand, he is not really recommending mass vaccination when there's a live pandemic, right? Because then immune escape can happen. Then you might be forcing the virus to create more virulent variants, and so this can be problematic with respect to the younger population. Another key problem that he highlights with these COVID vaccines is that the variants, or the people who are infected, may not be immune against the variants, against the variants. So when they actually catch the variant, the natural immunity, because so this is something that he says that it is not really highlighted in the current discussions, the role of the natural immune system, the role of the non-specific antibodies that are anyway active in this younger population, which that's why they don't get sick. So these natural immune system, or natural killer cells, so they won't really get activated when you have specific antibodies, which the kinds of which that the vaccines may produce, but the specific antibodies you have may not be effective against the variants, right? So it's kind of a very tricky scenario for those who get vaccinated, even because when they face the variant, the natural immune system is suppressed by the specific antibodies that they have from the vaccine, but those specific antibodies are not really effective against the variant. It's like, so suppose you have some security guards in your home, and if there's a break in, these security guards may have they might have some clubs, and they might hit the intruder and basically try to kill them from whatever the means that they can. So the situation can get very ugly, but they will somehow try to kill the intruder, right? But suppose there's another, like a very professional you get a professional bodyguard, or someone who may have a firearm and who may have firearm training and all that. So the professional bodyguard might say, okay, the security guards, you guys can stand down because I'm going to handle the intruders from now on. But once the intruder comes in, maybe the professional bodyguard is not really equipped to face the situation. Maybe they can't take the aim, maybe the night vision is not working. So now you don't have any protection, right? You don't have the natural immunity that is suppressed from the specific antibodies that you got from the vaccines. But on the other hand, your natural immune system, the non-specific antibodies are suppressed. So you basically don't have any protection that can be a problem, right? So those are the two main issues that is raising with respect to mass vaccination. That is, mass vaccination itself can create specific antibodies that may not be very effective with the variants, and then particularly for younger people who anyway have natural immunity, natural immune systems that are very effective, or like non-specific antibodies or natural killer cells which are not specifically tuned to attack COVID virus, but still they can be very effective, that might get suppressed, so they might be at a higher risk. The other problem is, of course, the risk of immune escape and kind of pushing the virus over the edge to create more virulent variants, right? So now this can mean that this can lead to kind of a never-ending battle between the virus variants and the new vaccines that might come up. Now already they are like hints of that this might happen. This is an article in Sunday Times in Sri Lanka. So they are actually, Professor Nilika Malaviki, who's one of the experts in Sri Lanka regarding this area, and she is actually suggesting that the variants basically what she suggests is that the variants with existing vaccines, we might not be able to tackle the variants, but the platform we can use to develop new vaccines to to handle the variants. So that whether that might lead to an infinite cycle where you continue to have to develop new vaccines and distribute and inject new vaccines to attack the variants or prevent the variants from spreading. But from what Geert said, if you have mass vaccination, so if that drives more variants, right? If it's just one or two variants that you can get rid of, that might be okay. But if the mass vaccination itself is pushing immune escape, right, then you have kind of this never-ending battle, right? Especially because the replication time for this virus is very short. It's 10 hours according to him. So I mean, you can never win that battle because it can always come up with a variant, and if the immune escape happens, it can always come up with a variant, and you'll have to continue to produce new vaccines and maybe distribute new vaccines, and even kind of aggressively push, because currently what we see is states around the world are aggressively pushing these vaccines, which has numerous problems, because one problem could be the side effects, and also the the issue with how it will affect the autonomy of people regarding their healthcare related decisions, right? All these legal issues and the huge financial burden, because most of the time the states basically buy these vaccines on credit, or in Sri Lanka, for instance, they had to take a loan from the World Bank, and which eventually we'll have to pay back, right? So there's a huge financial cost as well, and but for the vaccine manufacturers, it might be a very robust business model, but it might not be a very good deal for the the general public. So there are like numerous implications of this. Yeah, so basically that's what I wanted to highlight, and there are some like existing literature that suggests that even with other um, uh, even with other kinds of vaccines, right? Vaccine escape has been observed. For instance, this article is from 2007 that says that the vaccine escape recombinants emerging from pneumonia related vaccines, right? So it is not something that is completely theoretical or hypothetical. It has been observed in the past. Now with COVID, according to Geert, this is the likelihood of this happening is higher because never before has a virus been more under pressure, right? Because never before we had a vaccine distributed in such a large number across a huge portion in the population in a very short period of time. So it's under tremendous pressure. So we kind of think about these vaccinations and things like that as static things, right? But the virus itself is trying to evolve, trying to survive. So I think it what he says has some substance. So this is another paper regarding the hepatitis B vaccine causing immune escape mutants in Africa. So this was published in 2018. So this with respect to other vaccines, it has been observed, and even with things like measles vaccine, which is kind of very popular these days, there are some opinions among the experts that it might be causing the vaccine escape might be happening, which means that more virulent variant might come up because of mass vaccination. Again, it's kind of an opinion there, but and even with SARS-CoV-2, some people has expressed concern regarding that, regarding the issue of immune escape. So now I was interested. This is another article that I came up in Bloomberg, where they basically, this is just an opinion, but it's an interesting piece because it's basically saying a permanent pandemic where there will be variants, right? So now again, with what Geert said, this if mass vaccination itself is pushing the vaccine to produce more, like come up with more variants, then we are at a tricky situation, right? We are like digging a bottomless pit, where what you the very thing that you try to do to like curb the situation or resolve the situation is making it worse, kind of. That's effectively what Geert is saying, right? Yeah, and this article too suggests that we might have to be in a state of permanent pandemic state because variants may come up. Now even with COVID, I think the rate at which variants has come up is I guess pretty unprecedented, because with previous pandemics or epidemics, I don't think variants were that common. Even with the Spanish flu, which COVID has often is often compared with, I think even with Spanish flu, it lasted for around 2 years at that time. So I haven't really seen about much talk about the variants. So maybe the drastic measures that we are taking is what what makes the virus to come up with more variants. So that's something to think about. And another thing that this is not something that Geert said. It's something that just came up to my mind when thinking about this, because the variants so far have come up have been originated or reported originally in UK, South Africa, and in Brazil. So all these three countries were countries they were subjected to these phase 3 vaccine trials, both Pfizer and AstraZeneca trials. So the Pfizer trials happened in this publication. The says that the Pfizer phase 3 trials happened in Brazil and South Africa, and in UK I think several trials happened, including the AstraZeneca trial. So if Geert's hypothesis is true, maybe, I don't know, maybe this might provide some evidence whether these variants emerged during the clinical trials, because I mean you have hundreds and thousands of people taking this vaccine, and they have these 2 doses which is like 6 weeks apart, I guess, and they have a suboptimal immune response. So whether that can cause immune escape and lead to variants that can be more infectious, something to think about. And even so there were some articles that are kind of interesting. In Forbes magazine I found this article where in the US, so this is mid-March, kind of still fairly recent, it has been observed that COVID is spiking in some US states where the vaccination rate is very high, right? So that's kind of a counterintuitive observation, right? You'd expect the vaccinated states to show lesser cases. So whether this is a new variant, we don't know. And even in India, I think so India had a kind of the number of cases drastically went down around January and February, and vaccination, I mean it's not really clear how this happened, because still vaccination was very, I mean the percentage of vaccinated population was fairly low in India, but still it came down, and recently there's a sudden spike, right? There's a sudden spike, which is why India actually halted the exportation of the AstraZeneca vaccine to Sri Lanka and a number of other countries, I think, claiming that they have to vaccinate their people more. So there was some disturbances in that supply chain as well. Anyway, so it's kind of interesting why that happened. Maybe it's a natural cycle, we don't know, but none of these are kind of absolute proof that the vaccines are causing immune escape. I'm not really sure whether we can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, because it's very difficult to track the formation of variants, I think. But it's something to think about. At least theoretically, I think it has some there may be some something to it. So perhaps the experts can think about it, and Geert is the so Geert is an expert in that domain, but I guess most experts have yet to really suggest that this might be happening. So if there's more more rigorous discussion around this, it will be useful, because if there's any value to what any basically this hypothesis is true, right? So we are in for deep trouble, because that means because it's very unlikely that the states who are currently pushing the vaccines will change their agenda. So it could mean that we can continue to face very virulent variants, and both the vaccinated and the unvaccinated groups can be at an increased risk in the long run, purely because of the mass vaccination policy. So that's kind of a very it's not a very intuitive thing to think about, but when you think about what he says, that's a possibility, right? So because of that, I think it's good to have some discussion around that. Maybe it's too late now, but still maybe it's never too late, because at least later on you can prevent more virulent variants from coming up. So that might be a good outcome, right? So even the CDC has warned that rising COVID cases are rising, right? Now another thing that so that's basically regarding the immune escape and the evolutionary pressure that is caused by the vaccines. Another thing that Geert says regarding the lockdown policies. So that is something. I mean, there has been many criticisms around the lockdown policies, but one thing he said kind of caught my attention, and he said that so the natural immune system of children and young people, and generally in everyone, it has very little memory, so it has to be constantly trained, right? It's like when you don't exercise, when you stay at the same place, your muscles get weak. So same way the natural immune system will get weaker in younger people. For instance, if they don't interact with the others, if they stay at home. So now people have been pretty much staying at home, particularly kids, for months and months. That means their natural immune system, the natural killer cells, the non-specific antibodies are pretty weak, right? And when they suddenly go out and when they face these variants, so that can wreak havoc. So this, I mean, his argument regarding this, the less attention being given to this natural immune system, non-specific immune system. So that's, I think, a valid argument, and that is something that we have to think about regarding the lockdowns and the social isolation. Now it's being relaxed in most countries, but I think this impact of it on the innate immune system, I would say the innate immune system is something that is often overlooked. So yeah, and also he is suggesting that the drastic measures like social isolation and also those measures that can also put more evolutionary pressure on the virus. So it's interesting thing to think about. It's like I mean, in English we have this, there's this saying that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So if you subject a bioorganism to immense pressure but you don't really kill it, right, it can still survive. So that becomes worse, right? That becomes more dangerous. So that's the essential idea, and that's the idea behind even in bacteria, the antibiotic resistance bacteria and so on, which is a non-problem, right? So right. So effectively, I mean, it's kind of in a philosophical sense, what he says is you have to sort of face the virus, and you have to, especially those who are with functioning and better innate immune systems, maybe they can take supplements, maybe they can try to improve that, and maybe they can cash it. And while the that's the traditional idea, or like original idea of herd immunity, that you let the virus run, and then those who have good innate immune systems will survive anyway, and you protect those who are with weak innate immunity, like elderly, frail people, and those with comorbidities. So those people you try to protect as much as possible, and maybe you can develop better treatments and things like that for those people. You don't really subject the virus to too much pressure. You don't try to prevent the spread too much, because then you are kind of pushing it over the edge, right? So it's kind of this I mean, when I heard that, it reminded me of this Eastern kind of thinking, where you don't really try to like suppress the negativity, you basically try to live with it. Or it's like this yin and yang, you have the dark side and kind of embrace it, accept it, try to work it out, right, rather than just trying to suppress and eliminate something, which is a kind of an Eastern idea, I think. Now actually in the East, people are more kind of even more very have very rigid ideas. In countries like Sri Lanka, even they have very rigid ideas regarding this kind of thing, where they think that you have to eliminate these things and so on. And it's better, it's good if you can eliminate it, but whether the real question is whether what you're doing makes it worse in the long run, right? Yeah, and also something somewhat relevant to this is this dengue epidemic or dengue virus which is a recurring problem in countries like Sri Lanka, these tropical countries. Now, one interesting thing happened. So I'm not really sure whether this is really related to the what Geert is saying, but that when I thought about it, because so there's this article, this is in Sinhalese, but basically what he says is that the dengue cases have drastically gone down into 2020 in Sri Lanka. Comparatively into 2019, it was kind of a pandemic, right? And every year, like many people get dengue, and through these dengue mosquito bites, and quite a few people die, right? So now the cases have drastically apparently gone down, and the official explanation for this was that it's because of the travel restrictions, which I think it's kind of a I find it hard to accept that, because I mean there were usually what happens in every year, government officials will visit households and they will push people to promote to clean up the gardens and prevent, like, clean up the places that where the mosquitoes might breed. So that's the policy, and every year before the dengue season that happens. So there's a very aggressive drive to, like, clean up the surroundings, and sometimes legal action is even taken for those who don't have any kind of breeding places in their gardens and so on. Now this year, all these, even I saw some photographs of the railway stations, so they were kind of not very well maintained, because for the due to COVID restrictions, these places were, they were basically deserted, right? So technically you'd expect the dengue cases to rise, and there was some speculation that it would happen because nobody really cleaned up, spent any time outdoors and organized themselves to clean up their neighborhoods. So, but apparently it has gone down. So I think there could be two reasons for that. One could be that maybe people are reluctant to get tested, and there could have been more cases where they were not simply tested. And the other thing, so that's what I was thinking all this time, but when I heard what Geert had to say regarding evolutionary pressure and the idea that now even this idea of evolution, I think there are people who question evolution, right? Minority of scientists and some non-scientists in the West question whether Darwinian evolution is actually valid. But still, I think everyone pretty much agrees that microevolution happens, that microorganisms evolve all the time, and we can really see that, right? The problem comes with macroevolution when you try to extrapolate that to jumping from one species to another, right? So that's entirely different topic, but pretty much I guess everyone agrees that microevolution is something that we can agree upon. So when he mentioned about this idea of evolutionary pressure, whether by kind of restricting the breeding grounds and so on, whether we are subjecting maybe the mosquito as well as the dengue virus to a lot of evolutionary pressure, and maybe that created more virulent variants in the previous years, and maybe 2020 that pressure was not there, so the virus was not that infectious. Maybe a lot of people got it, but they didn't really get sick. So something to think about. So whether that was one reason that contributed to the lesser number of cases. Of course, I'm not really sure whether there's a way to actually definitively test that hypothesis. So it's a very difficult hypothesis to test anyway. Even with COVID, I think it's very difficult to test it. So all we can come up with is some kind of evidence, right, whether that is happening. Okay, so basically that's what I wanted to talk about in this video, particularly whether mass vaccination. Now there are a couple of the majority of the people who are worried about mass vaccinations are worried about the side effects the short term as well as potential long term side effects, because nobody really knows whether there will be no long term side effects because it has not been tested in the long run. But that's the majority of the people who have some concerns or reservations regarding the vaccine, mass vaccination. But this is what Geert is suggesting is something different. Now, even if you assume that on an individual level the vaccines are work perfectly, but he says is at a population level that there can be other problems like immune escape and the innate immunity being suppressed against the variants and so on, right? So it's kind of a different line of argument than the kind of traditional so-called anti-vaxxer argument. He's not anti-vaxxer. I don't think he's an anti-vaxxer, but he's using some ideas in biology and immunology to suggest that mass vaccination, when there's a live pandemic, especially if the vaccines are not what he calls sterilizing vaccines, that if they don't kill the virus, they just suppress the symptoms, right? They are prophylactic vaccines, so that means they leave room for immune escape, and at the same time you subject the virus to tremendous amount of evolutionary pressure, which might lead to the emergence of more infectious variants, right? And the other problem is, of course, due to the specific antibodies which are going to suppress the natural immune system, but the natural innate immune system, but they won't be effective against the variants, and this might lead the people with the functioning innate immune systems also vulnerable, right? Particularly the younger people and the younger and healthy adults, even more vulnerable to any future variants when they get infected with any future variants, right? So basically that's what I want to highlight. I thought it's an important topic anyway, because vaccination is anyway an important topic. So I guess if you have any other ideas or comments regarding this, you can comment in the comment section, and I will share most of these all of these links in the description, and you can have a look, and feel free to comment if you have any thoughts or any other ideas regarding this. Okay, so I'll stop there. Thanks a lot for connecting, and see you again with a similar video. Thank you.